Hey there, it's Leslie at Leslie's Cookies and Treats, and here is another summer snowman cookie for you. This is another design that I found on the Treasure Box Designs website. That's a scrapbooking, paper piecing website, and she has a lot of really cute ideas and designs, and I adapted that to make a cookie cutter and a cookie out of it. I started by tracing the image onto the cookie by using a projector, and then I outlined and filled in one of his feet, and now I'm going to do his eyes, and I'm going to use a wet on wet technique to add the pupils in on his eyes. So I'm starting with a brown color here, and I'm just going to put a ball of icing, and my ball of icing didn't look very ball-like, so I'm going to try to maneuver it a little bit with my scribe, but you have to be careful because you don't want all of the icing just to blend together and become like a tie-dye or swirl effect. So just use an up and down motion with your scribe. And I decided to go back in and add a little more brown icing so it would be more of a ball shaped. And again, I'm just using an up and down motion to kind of wiggle it into place. And then I put a black pupil in the middle of that. And I'm adding the brown and the black icing immediately while the icing is still wet so that when it dries, it is just one solid surface. And here I'm just going to add a couple of little highlights with the white. Again, I'm doing this immediately before it's had a chance to crust over. And while I wait for it to crust over, I will move on to the ice cream at the top of his head. I'm kind of going for a mint chocolate chip look here, so I'm going to use a mint colored green icing. My icing is a little bit too stiff, so I am going to have to wiggle it with my scribe to get it to settle down. And then I'll let that section dry before I pipe anything right next to it. I am going to go ahead and add in the stem to the cherry on the top, and then I will move on down to the scarf. I'm just going to outline this section and fill it in. My red icing is about a 15-second consistency. And then I will let this section dry before I pipe in the other sections of the scarf, but I will go ahead now and do the fringe at the base of the scarf. To do the fringe, I'm just going to do short little lines at the bottom of the scarf. It doesn't really matter if they're all even because they will be covered up by the scarf, but just make several little lines for the fringe. And his foot has had a chance to crust over, so I'm going to come in here and outline and flood in the ice cream cone. And then I will let that section dry before I pipe anything that's right next to it. And as always, I am going to use my scribe to bring the icing out to the point and to smooth it out and distribute it evenly throughout the ice cream cone. And while I wait for the cone to crust over, I will go ahead and pipe in his other foot. I'm just going to slowly outline it and flood it in. And once again, I'll let that dry before I pipe anything that's right next to it. So I'm going to move back up to the face because the eyes have had a chance to dry as well as the scarf. And I'm just going to outline the section of his face and flood that in. I'm going to be careful not to pipe too much icing right around his eyes because I don't want to cover his eyes. And then I'll just use my scribe to get the icing out to all of the points and to go around his eyes and make sure that it's all evenly distributed. And then while we wait for that section to dry, I will go ahead and pipe in the cherry on top using the pink royal icing. And again, I'll use my scribe to distribute the icing, settle it down, and pop any air bubbles. Little areas like this tend to crater, so making sure there's no air bubbles is important. And moving back down to the scarf, I'm going to pipe in the top section of the scarf. I'm going to slightly overfill it because I don't want this to crater. You could also have put a squiggle of icing down the middle before filling in this section, again, in an effort to avoid craters. And I'm going to use my scribe to bring the icing out to the point. And moving back down to the bottom of the cookie, I'm going to fill in a little bit of his belly here. And then I put the cookie in a dehydrator for a little bit. You could also put it in front of a table fan. And then I'm coming back in and flooding in his hand that's holding the ice cream. I should have probably done this last as the very last step since it's going to be the closest part of the cookie to you. But I did it now and that's okay. We're going to make it work. Generally, when I'm decorating cookies that have all of these little parts, I try to work from the farthest back to the things that are going to be nearest to you. And so this hand would have definitely been the last part that I would have piped. And coming back to the bottom section of the scarf, I'm going to overfill this section with hopes that it doesn't crater and use my scribe to manipulate the icing and pop any air bubbles. And I'll let the scarf dry for a while I come back up here to his head, and I'm going to add in the fudge drip that is kind of like hair almost on this cookie. And then I'll use my scribe to smooth the icing out and make sure the icing gets down to all of those points. And now, grabbing my pink royal icing in a 15-second consistency, I'm going to pipe in the ball of ice cream at the top of the cone. And because his face has crusted over, it's okay to go ahead now and give him a big, huge oval nose, just like in the design from Treasure Box Designs. And while I've been working on other parts of the cookie, you can see I got a crater, and because this icing has not crusted over all the way yet, I'm just going to put a little more icing in that spot and use an up and down motion with my scribe to jiggle all the icing together and get it to smooth out. And then I let my cookie dry in the dehydrator for a little while. You can also, again, put it in front of a table fan. And now I will go back in and flood in the rest of his body. In the Treasure Box design, he actually is wearing clothes. I'm just going to keep him white. But he also would have been adorable with a mint green outfit to match the mint green ice cream on his head. And I forgot earlier to flood this little part for his neck, so I'll do that now. And then I'll add in a ball of icing for his hand. I'm going to kind of make it in a mitten shape so it'll have a thumb and then a spot for like all of the fingers. And I'll use my scribe to shape that icing. And off camera, I added a bead of icing to the bottom of the ice cream cone and also to the bottom of the mint ice cream on top of his head. And I let it crust over just a little bit, and now I'm taking a paintbrush and I am just dabbing up and down at it, trying to give it some texture. And the pink hasn't quite set up enough yet, so I might need to wait a few more minutes before coming back and dabbing at it again. And these cute little snowmen are done. Off camera, I added the lines to the cones and some eyelashes. I think they came out really adorable, and I have another video for another summer snowman, and I'll leave a link to that in the description. If you enjoyed this and you want to see more cookie tutorials, be sure to like and subscribe. Bye!